Welcome to the Blytheway Mining Show on Core London TV. I am Bonnie Hughes, Business Development Manager for Royal Haskoni DHV Mining Group. Our guest today is Mick Billing. He is Chairman and CEO of Thor Mining. Yesterday, they just put out news of a maiden inferred resource on their Kapunda copper project in Australia. Hello, Mick. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to give us some background on the Kapunda project?
Sure, Bonnie, and nice to talk to you again. Kapunda, we got involved in about middle of last year, I guess, as an opportunity to get into something that, get into a commodity that I've always liked. I think copper is a wonderful metal to be in if you're in the mining business. And we had the opportunity to come in and do something a little bit innovative on a deposit that has been around for a long, long time. In fact, Kapunda was the first copper mine in Australia back in the 1800s. In those days, back in the late 1800s, they pulled out a whole bunch of extraordinarily high-grade ore, some 25 to 35% copper, put it on a boat and sent it back to England for people to put it through their plants, their smelters, etc.
Well,
and that kept on going until there was still a bit of tribute mining going around 1910, 1912, but nothing since then. So they pulled out a very, very high grade core, but what was left behind particularly in oxide and what we call secondary sulfide mineralization was a very large low grade halo, and that's what we've been focusing on. Now, Kapunda is right on the edge of town. The Kapunda deposit, if we mined it in the conventional way, we would in an open pit take out half the main street, the local primary school, and at least one of the two pubs, and certainly that part would get the local population a bit upset. So
yes, and these days you don't want to upset the local population.
Now, what we have found along the way is this deposit. We've looked at this using a bunch of people who were involved in situ leaching of uranium here in South Australia. I guess we are, to some extent, a centre of expertise for in situ recovery techniques in Australia, here in South Aussie. There are two.
And for our viewers, sorry, Mick, for our viewers who may not understand what in situ leaching is, can you just put it in layman's terms?
Yeah, sure, Bonnie. What you do in a conventional mine is dig a hole, you crush the rock, you grind it, and then you either put it through a flotation circuit, or if it's gold, you might put it through. You might try and dissolve it in cyanide. In situ leaching, we take away most of those processes and therefore manage to produce metal relatively cheaply. You drill some holes in the ground, and then and for the deposits where this works, you then put into into a central hole a solution of a solution that will dissolve the metal that you are trying to dissolve, and then from a couple of holes either side or around the central injection hole, we extract fluid, and that fluid that we extract has dissolved quite a bit, in this case, of the copper as we go. So it's very environmentally benign as far as surface landscape is concerned. If you manage it properly, you make sure that you don't do any damage to the local groundwater, because that's something you must avoid. And it's a way of producing copper very, very cheaply. Not all mineral deposits are suitable for this. There are a number of uranium projects around the world find it very, very suitable. In fact, 50% of the world's uranium is produced in this manner. As far as copper goes, there are a couple of copper in situ recovery mines in Arizona in the United States, and a couple in Russia. For those in Russia, we don't have an enormous amount of detail about, so I can't quote those. The production figures and the production costs for BHP and Magma in Arizona, and for the feasibility study, for example, on Excelsior Mining in Arizona, they're talking very, very cheap mining, less than so in the order of I think Excelsior. And while I don't like to quote other companies on a show about me or about Thor, Excelsior are talking about production costs for their operation at grades very similar to ours, of about 70 US cents a pound, or if you want to convert that and compare it to the $7,000 a ton that copper currently fetches, about $1,500 US dollars a ton of produced copper. So very cheap, very low impact visually, and if managed right with the right deposit, environmentally very, very benign.
That's excellent. And what's the next steps for Kapunda?
Yeah. So this is what we think we've got there. And we now believe we've got, according to the resource estimate, we have almost 120,000 tonnes of contained copper at Kapunda at 7,000 US dollars a tonne. That's a very valuable deposit. We have to demonstrate that that it will work technically. We also have to demonstrate to the local community that we're not going to bugger up the environment that surrounds them because they like living there, and it's a nice town and a lovely area. So we have to look after their interests as well as demonstrate that this thing can be done technically. We've done sufficient work that we are relatively confident that technically it will work, but we now have to demonstrate that in some field recovery trials, which we should be getting on with later on this year.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mick, for joining us. I look forward to reading some more news about your progress on that project and your other projects that you have going on, because I know that you've just put out some info on your tungsten project last month. So that's fantastic with the progress that you've made on all your projects. Thank you for joining us, Mick.
Bonnie, thank you very much, and nice to talk to you again.
And thank you, viewers, for joining us. Please do your homework and your research, minimize your losses, and maximize your returns.